Hello, this is RICKY, the Android guy. Hey guys, today we are bringing you the best smartphones of 2015. So these are just going to be the smartphones that stand out overall as the best ones this year. So it's been a big year in smartphones in terms of really just making good improvements. You had some really great smartphones all around and less gimmicks than we've had in past years, just great overall phones, and that really meant a lot. So let's take a look and which ones made the top 10. Now, before we get to the top 10, we are going to go over some honorable mentions. So there was 4 honorable mentions that didn't make the top 10, but I felt they just had to be mentioned for reasons of being really great smartphones overall. So the first one is the Moto G. The Moto G is a great smartphone priced at $220. It is water resistant at that level, 720p display, 16 gigs of storage, 2 gigs of RAM, has a micro SD with a 13 megapixel camera and 5 megapixel camera as well. Great all-around phone for the price. It's still relatively hard to beat, and it just had to be mentioned for being one of the better smartphones that didn't make the top 10, but definitely is a great phone. Next up is the Nexus 5X. Now, the Nexus 5X is the successor to the Nexus 5 from a couple years back, actually. But overall, I felt it was really not the same level as the Nexus lineup had been in the past. In terms of the looks, it's rather bland, and it just definitely, in terms of price point and what it had to offer, didn't offer as much as the other models that came in the top 10. Now, overall, it is priced at $379 for 32 gigs of storage. You also have 2 gigs of RAM built in, 12 megapixel camera, and a 5 megapixel camera, 5.2-inch screen. You have a Type C. You always get the latest updates, and that's really what put it on the honorable mention list. But overall, it had a lot of things lacking that just didn't bring it up to the same level the past Nexuses did in the years past. The Alcatel Idol 3. Now, this was a phone that pretty much came out of nowhere. Alcatel is still a relatively newcomer, especially in the US more so. Really came in with a great price point of $180 to $250 for their 4.7 or 5.5-inch screen phone with a great processor on there, 13 megapixel rear, 8 megapixel front, reversible phone, the first one ever you can actually talk either on the top or the bottom. Doesn't matter how you flip the phone, you can talk from it, and it has front firing speakers. It's a really great design phone, and it gave the Moto G an honestly run for its money at just being an amazing phone for amazing price. It really stood up to the competition in some big ways. Now, another one that really stood out was the Asus Zenfone 2, but I wanted to especially highlight the Deluxe edition just because for $400 it's one of the best phones out there, and one I would particularly rate over other ones that used to take that category in terms of OnePlus 2. You have fast charging on here, 13 megapixel rear camera, 5 megapixel front camera, 4 gigs of RAM, micro SD card slot, LTE, 5.5-inch screen, and 128 gigs of storage. I mean, this is just a monster. To have 128 gigs of storage plus micro SD card, all for $400, it really stood out and being an amazing smartphone this year, and definitely one that made a huge impact in terms of the best bang for your buck under $400. It's hard to argue with why you shouldn't get the Asus Zenfone 2 Deluxe. Now in the first top 10, we have the Moto X Pure Edition. Moto X continuously has been a great overall offering. Lenovo definitely took it over this year, and it definitely took its phone game up a notch, up until the point where it actually got into the top 10 this year. We had a 5.7-inch Quad HD display, 20 megapixel camera, 5 megapixel front camera, 64 gigs of storage, coming in at $400 to $500 depending on the storage. This does have a micro SD card and 3 gigs of storage. The reason why it didn't score higher on this list, well, simply because even though it did up the camera, it did the same thing that HTC did in a sense where although you had a higher megapixel in camera, it really didn't just show the quality, especially in low light images. Is where it really found lacking, and just not as overall punchy of colors definitely in the photos. For number 9, we have the iPhone 6s. Of course, the iPhone's going to make it into the top 10, and it just definitely stands out. Apple finally stepped it up this year and really finally improved not only the screen quality, but just definitely having 2 gigs of RAM and finally a good camera, 12 megapixel rear camera and 5 megapixel front camera. I mean, if you've ever taken a photo with an iPhone in the past year and put it on a computer, it looks horrible. It has really looked horrible. But really, this year, it definitely stepped it up. Finally, having good photos, if it's on the iPhone screen or if it's on the computer screen, it definitely stood out a lot better. And this year, Apple really stepped it up with their camera and definitely had to be on here. For $750, the iPhone 6s is one to definitely get. And I say the $750 one because you only want to get the 64 gig. Apple's still ripping off their customers when it comes to 16 megapixels on a, or sorry, 16 gigabyte storage, but 64 gigs is a great price point for $750. And the next one is the LG G4. The G4 was a statement phone. It let customers know that yes, you can still have removable battery. Yes, you can still have micro SD card, and that was its key selling point that you can do that. You have a 16 megapixel rear camera, 8 megapixel front camera, quad HD display, definitely comes out brighter than last year's G3 that was penalized for that, just having a very low level screen. This one definitely has a brighter screen and stands out for having a price point of only $600. So it really stands out for that. Now, the other thing that really took the G4 back and why it wasn't successful this year as LG would have liked is because it looked the same. If you did not get the leather back version of the G4, it might as well have been the G3 in terms of looks. And this really hurt its sales greatly, and it's why it didn't sell more. And also, it just didn't have as great of the auto camera photos that we would have liked. Obviously, if you know how to use aperture, ISO, EV, and everything in a manual camera, the LG G4 is an amazing camera for that purchase. But for its auto, it didn't come out looking as good as other cameras in the market. Following that up, the Galaxy S6 and S6 Edge. Now, I did join these two as a tie simply because it really depends on the person which one you want to get. Now, Samsung definitely improved their look and feel with this year's two models. The glass backing, glass front, metal frame around it. They were the first manufacturer to use 7,000 aluminum so that the phones would not bend, and just really stood out in terms of quality this year. This definitely brought back Samsung from the mediocre design to the frontrunner design. And if you don't believe anyone, ask HTC. They went on look alone, and that's why their M9 didn't sell, besides other shortcomings. So the S6 really stood out, definitely. It has a quad HD, but it has the best quad HD with the Super AMOLED panel. It just stands out of not being one of the most vivid, but if you put it on the photo, the most accurate in colors. 16 megapixel rear camera, 5 megapixel front camera, and it probably started the trend this year for having great auto photos that you don't need to do anything to fix on Android. It definitely stood out and it made it a really big improvement. Not to mention the fingerprint being really great. This comes in at an average of 580 across all carriers for buying it outright. Definitely stood out in terms of the S6. The Edge definitely had a huge impact in terms of looks, and for $100 more, you do get an hour more battery life. For me, I would say the Edge is the one that I would personally recommend, but I can definitely understand for the less expensive price going with the S6. And in sixth place, we have the iPhone 6s Plus, the far better iPhone, and the one I would personally recommend any iPhone user to get. Not only do you finally get optical image stabilization in an iPhone at this price point, you really have, again, the just better overall cameras that Apple brings to the table. This was a huge improvement from last year's phone that really just was beaten by many other phones out there on the market in terms of camera quality. This year, it stood its ground and it did a huge improvement. And this is the one thing that iPhone needs to do, have better cameras, and this one really made it stand out. You have an amazing battery life, 1080p display, 64 gigs of storage is the one, of course, again recommend, so that's at the $850 price point. 2 gigs of RAM, and again a fingerprint scanner. This really stands out as being the best iPhone that Apple has ever made, as they like to say. And really, if you're an iPhone user, this is the one you should buy. Coming in right after that is the Galaxy S6 Edge Plus. This phone really made an impact. For one, having I believe the third longest battery life in the US, it really just stands out as having an amazing battery life and the thinnest phablet ever made. This phone is extremely thin, and even if you have a heavy case, it is going to be lightweight. It definitely stands out. Now, again, it took everything that the S6 had and improved upon it. You had a 5.7 Quad HD display, but you had the first phone this year with 4 gigs of DDR4 RAM. This RAM is faster than most computers in the world right now. It's just amazing of how much speed this phone has. I myself have never had lag on it, and it just really stood out in that purpose. Really great overall in terms of features, but it did not have what it took to be better than the other phones on the top 10 list, just because of one thing, and that is its price. Its price was just pretty expensive. I'm going close to $900 to $1,000 depending on the carrier. It's just not worth that much price. If it was priced closer to that of something like the Note 5 or like these other phablets in the market, it definitely might have come in closer to winning. Now, for this next one, we have a tie between two carrier branded phones. So the unfortunate part is for number 4, it depends on the carrier you are with. But definitely one of the best phones on AT&T is the S6 Active from Samsung. This phone has everything the S6 had, but it has the longest battery life in the US, typically ranging above 10 hours of screen on time. It loses the fingerprint and mostly the updates, and that's why it's not towards the top, simply because of the fact that without the fingerprint scanner and without the updates, it does definitely have a compelling reason not to be at the top. So because of those two reasons, it doesn't go any higher, but having the longest battery life in the US still with the great camera quality is pretty impressive, and one you should definitely consider if you're on AT&T. If you're on Verizon, however, you should definitely consider the Droid 2 Turbo. Now, while the S6 Active had the longest battery life in the US as its niche feature, this has the best screen in terms of a shatterproof glass. This phone really stands up to being the most durable glass you can get on a smartphone, and they will fix it no matter what. That is a pretty impressive guarantee. The fact that if you break your glass, that Motorola will replace it. It's a great feature and one that definitely stands out. Not only does it have that, but it also has the best mics in all phones. If you want the best noise cancellation, if you're constantly in an area where you need to be clear when talking, then you're definitely going to want to go with the Moto Droid 2 Turbo. It just has amazing noise cancellation, the best out there. 5 mics total, just standing out really when it comes to that. Not only that, but its camera is going to be amazing with having just great quality, 8 megapixel camera, and 5.4 Quad HD display, 64 gigs of storage built in, and that definitely stands out as having 64 gigs of storage. You also have 3 gigabytes of RAM, again DDR4, one of the other phones that have DDR4 RAM built into it. It also is one of the phones that has 64 gigs and still having a micro SD card. These features definitely put it way up there, and one you should definitely consider if you're on Verizon. Comes in at $624 if you just pay outright. If you do it on Verizon's payment plan, it becomes $524. Then coming in at number 3 is The Nexus 6P. This is the highest rated Nexus we've ever had here, and it is by far the best Nexus ever made. This one really surprised me as I've never been impressed with the Nexus line for the past 3 or 4 years. It just hasn't stood out. But with this one, Huawei definitely knows what they're doing, and I can't wait to review more of their products if this is what they're offering. The cameras are amazing on here. 21 megapixel rear camera and 5 megapixel front camera that stand up to being better in some cases than even the number 2 and 1 rated phones of this year. The camera really stood out and it definitely had a lot to offer. The AMOLED display really stood out as well as being a Quad HD AMOLED screen. It looks better than even the next one will. It has Nexus imprint, it has Type-C, it has 3 gigs of DDR4 RAM, and it has front-firing speakers. This really stands out. Not only that, but for being obviously a better price point, coming in at $450 for a 32 gig model or $600 for a 128. Price points are amazing for this device, and it definitely stands out because of it. Overall, I would definitely recommend this when it comes to price point, when it comes to everything. If you want a pure Google experience, the Nexus is definitely the way to go. I would say the main downfall is that stock Android really doesn't have as much to offer as I would have liked. In terms of what it has to offer, it still doesn't have things like split screen capability and just other capabilities that you really think it would by now. It's just missing out on a lot of enhanced features and features that the number 1 and 2 smartphone of this year do have, and that's why it rated this low, simply because of the fact that when it comes down to it, it just misses out on a lot of different features overall that you should have on a smartphone nowadays. And when stock Android has it, I can definitely see the Nexus lineup coming to number 1 next year. Coming in second place is the LG V10. LG showed what they could do with this phone. They really took everything and that they had in the concept for the G4 and improved it. They added some great features, having again a Quad HD display at a 5.7-inch screen, Gorilla Glass 4, 16 megapixel rear camera, and 5 megapixel front camera. 64 gigs of storage built in with 4 gigs of RAM as well. You have micro SD card expandability, you have OIS, you have a fingerprint scanner, and it's just a really great phone. It does have some of the versatility as well, as I was saying earlier, when it comes to split screen, which you don't find with things like the Nexus. But because of that, it really stands out as overall great experience. Now, in terms of why it didn't get number 1, well, it really is just right below it, but really when it comes down to it, LG needs to fine tune their user interface a bit more. Even though that's something you can change with launchers, they don't have as much personalization. And again, they really went to bat with the manual controls instead of having just a great overall automatic camera experience. Although software updates have helped it, if you look at some of the comparisons that we've done with the V10, you will notice the fact that the V10 has a bubble effect with their front wide camera that I was very excited to try out, but then disappointed when we did review it. Overall, it is an amazing phone and definitely should be considered as one of the best phones of this year. V10 really gave me an excitement to see what LG has planned for the next year. And that means the best smartphone of the year. And yes, if you have watched this for the past years, this is its 3rd year in a row, the Galaxy Note 5. When it comes to having the full package, this one just really knocked it out of the park. Not only does it have the best looking display by far, you can put it up to any display, and it is a Quad HD Super AMOLED of 5.7-inch screens of just beauty. It has the best low light for both front and rear camera, along with the best video quality without doing anything to it. Just leave it on automatic and it will do the rest. It has the best optical stabilization that I've ever seen for video. and that is really shown. It has the S Pen, which really just is so great that Samsung put in some really nice features this year, being able to write on it as soon as you take the pen out, and it saves as soon as you put the pen back in. Still being able to do lots of tricks with it that we've gone over in our hidden feature videos, having split screen, having 32 gigs or 64 gigs of storage, having the fastest RAM yet again at DDR4 RAMs of 4 gigs. Again, this is faster than most people have on their current computer that they have at home right now. It has built-in wireless charging. It has amazing fast charging. I can't tell you how many times the fast charging has saved me when I needed to charge quickly, and it always amazes me how quickly it charges. It has Samsung's new Samsung Pay, which honestly I use on an everyday basis because I can use it anywhere. Anywhere I can swipe a credit card, I can use it, and I use it on a daily basis. I've had every single one of these phones on this list at one point or another during this year, and really the Note 5 is the one I always went back to. There you have it, guys. These were our best smartphones of 2015, and it really has been a great year. It has really just been a fine-tuning year. Yes, not as much innovation, some improvements definitely when it comes to looks, but really what stood out to me this year is just quality, fixing the battery, fixing the camera, things that customers more so needed than a lot of gimmicks that we've had in the past years. Let me know which phone is your favorite of 2015 and which one you look forward to getting in 2016. Thank you as always for watching. This has been RICKY, the Android Guy.